Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, dear student and viewers. Today our topic is data collection method, step 1, interviewing. As you know that data collection methods are integral part of the research designs, and there are the several data collection methods, each have some advantage and disadvantage. Interviewing, observations as questionnaires. But today we discuss the interviewing methods of data collections. As you know that the research process for the basic and applied research, scientific research design is the step 6, and data collection method analysis and interpretation is the step 7. As you know that our module 3 is focused on data collection methods and the framework and how is important of data collection, how can we collect the data collection from different form and different types and different way to collection of collect the data by the researcher. Data collection methods, you have seen a complete framework or a diagram how can a researcher collect a data. Data collection method basically based on observations, questionnaires and interviewing and some other three most important principles: principle of wording, principle of measurements and general data. These principles are based is on questionnaires, but today we discuss the interviewing part. It is very integral part of the research for collection of the data. Interviewing's collection of data is from respondent to obtain the information on the issues of interest. Interviews could be unstructured or structured and conduct either face to face, by telephone, by online and by mail. The unstructured and structured interviews are discussed first. Firstly, we discuss to unstructured interview. What is the unstructured interview? Unstructured interviews are so labeled because the interviewers does not enter the interview setting with the planned sequence of the question to be asked for the respondent. Basically, the objective of the unstructured interview is to bring some preliminary issues to the surface, and so that the researchers can determine what variables need further in-depth interview. Basically, unstructured interview is exploring a preliminary issues or surface-based issues for conducting a unstructured interview by the researcher. A structured interview basically is well planned interview. Our structures are already will be developed by the researcher, and structured interviews are those conducted when it is known at the outset what the information is needed. The interview has a list of predetermined and conduct when it is known at the outset what the information is needed. The interviewers has a list of predetermined questions list to be asked of the respondent, either personally, through telephonic and through online. A complete list of questionnaires of questions of the interviews are already be prepared by the researcher, by the interviewers. Interviewing are unstructured and structured interviewers. Tips for interviewing: face-to-face and telephonic interviews, computer-assisted interviews. In the interviewing integral part of the data collection methods, we discussed unstructured and structured interview, and before these slides we have already discussed unstructured and structured interviews. Now the next we discuss the tips for interviewing face and telephonic interviews, what is the computer based assisted interview. Some tips to follow in the interviewing. The basics: free information, biased free information. Without biased informations are most important for data collections for both of interviewers and interviewing. There are three main things are which have most important for conducting the interview that could be introduced by the interviewees and a situation. There are three main factors that have a chance to some collection of some biased data. That the main three sources we keep in our mind for taking a pure data. If the biasness will be developed, maybe introduced, maybe created in three areas: in the side of interviewers, in the side of interviewees, and some situations. And one by one we discussed each situations. If we want to collect a biased free information, you know that the biased free information is the most important for our final research results. The questions techniques, first of all, funneling. The funneling in the beginning of unstructured interviews, it is advisable to ask the open-ended question to get a broad idea and form some impressions about the situation. For example, question that could be asked would be, what are some of your feeling about working for this organization? That question shows a funnel approach of questioning techniques from for adopted by the researcher for collecting the data from the respondent. These types of question basically adopt a approach of a funneling approach of the questions for the questioning techniques. Second is unbiased questions. How can we develop, how can we collect the unbiased data? It is important to ask the question in a way that would ensure the least biased in the response. For example, tell me how you experience your job. It is the first questions. And the better questions is very better question. If we take the questions of why work you do must be really boring, I think that is little bit biased is there. The first option of the question, tell me how your experience in your job is better question than the why the work you do must be really boring. The question, unbiased question, is the most important for the collection of data. Second is techniques of the questionings in the interviews is the clarifying the issues to make sure that the researcher understand issues as the respondent intend to represent them. It is the advisable to restate if rephrase important information given by the respondent, and it is very helpful. There is an unfair promotion policy in this organization. Seniority does not count at all. It is the juniors who always get the promoted. The researcher might interject, so you are saying that the juniors always get promoted over the heads, even capable seniors. That is the examples of clarifying during your question is interview question. You're clarifying the issues, you're clarifying the problem to the respondent. If you clarifying the problem and the issues, respondent give a appropriate answer to you for collections of your right data in the right. The questionnaires techniques. Next, the best questionnaire techniques is the helping a respondent to think through the issues. If the respondent is not able to verbalize her perception, his and her perceptions, and replies, I don't know, the researcher should ask the question in simpler way of rephrase it. For instance, of respondent unable to specify with the aspect of the job he dislike, the researcher might ask the questions is, for example, the respondent might be asked, which task he would prefer to do, serve the customers or do some filling the work. If the answer is serve the customer, the researcher might use another aspect of the respondent jobs and ask the paired choice questions again in this way. That is a techniques of the interview questions that help the respondent and try to create a thinking process in the inside of respondent, and they have deeply addressed and come back to informed us about a real issues in the organizations with the time for answer is relevant to the data, and that is most important for the interview questionings when the interviewers are help to the respondent and try to think through the issues, the respondent to think about the issues and the problem where we want to take the real data and unbiased data. And most important, taking the notes when conducting the interview. It is important that the researcher makes the written notes as the interviews are taking place as soon as interview is terminated. The interviewers should not be rely on the memory, because the information recalled from the memory is imprecise. Sometimes you can keep all the things in your mind. That I suggest the interviewers to mix the notes during your interviews questions and when you are conducting interview. That is most important. A personal taking notes are most important for follow up of your interviews and collection of data for getting the better result of your study. About all questionnaires. And last one is how to conduct the interviews. We repeat it and follow up: face-to-face interviews, telephonic interviews, and computer assisted interviews, CATI, CAPI, and VCS. There are different types of basically interviews are conducted by the researcher for collection of the data. Our question is how to conduct the interviews. For example, the first interviews option is have the researcher, have the interviewers, have the face-to-face interviews. Interviews can be conducted there face-to-face or over telephonic. They could also be computer assisted. Although most unstructured interview in the organization research are conducted face-to-face. Structured interviews could be either face-to-face through the medium of telephone, medium of the mail, depending on the level of complexity of the issues involved, the likely duration of the interviews, that convenience of the both parties for interviewers and the interviewee. When the information from the large number of respondents spread over wide geographical area is obtained quickly, and likely duration of each interviews is say 10 minutes or less. Many market surveys instance conducting through the structured telephonic interviews. In addition, the computer assisted interviews also be possible and easy to manage and have a safe timing when the researcher adopt a computer assisted interviews. But telephonic interviews also be some advantage and disadvantage. Face interviews are also be some advantage and some advantages, and computer assisted interviews also be some advantage and disadvantage. But it's depend on the nature of the study and the nature of data which likely to be researcher collecting from a respondent. The computer assisted interviews, CATI and CAPI, are most important, and CATI is the computer assisted interview, telephonic interviewing, and the CAPI is the computer assisted personal interviewing, and sometime we used a VCS voice capturing system for when we are going to collect a qualitative based data, we adopt some software for collection of a information through voice capturing system from the respondent. The voice recording system assists the CATI program by recording the interview's responses. Courtesy, ethics, as well as the legal requirement would be required that the respondent permission to record be obtained before the voice capturing system VCS. The VCS allows the computer to capture the respondent answering, which are recorded in digital mode and stored in data file. They can be played back later, for example, listen to the customer by the region, industry, and the combination of different sets of factors in the problem. And later we recorded interview, the voice capturing system, we have listened and developed a respondent feedbacks in form of interviews and form of informations. And computer aided survey is also the most important. Here is our question is basically the options. The researcher have options and the interviewers have the option for taking the information, collecting of the data. Basically in main three areas: face-to-face interviews, telephonic interview, computer assisted interview, and further computer assisted interviews have a CATI, CAPI, and VCS. After that, when we have conducted the computer assisted interviewing, we use a different softwares of packages, and they have some advantage of softwares. The automatic indexing of the data can be done. A special program indexing such as specific responses are coded in the particular way, and retrieval of the data with a fast search and speed covering 10,000 pages in less than 5 seconds. And your note takings and your personal note takings we can also be developed in the numerical data, which we have manually makes the notes with uses of software packages, and that is easy for us, and time saving also be to contact our qualitative data, our manual information to in the digital form in the computer assisted form of information. That's all about for the importance of some softwares. Field notes taken by the interviewers collect the data generally have to transcribed and hand coded, hand tabulated, and so all of which most difficult and time consuming. Mostly the computer and programming makes it easy for us to regard these two modes of operations. Indexing and retrieval is help us for developing, covering the data and management of the data with some software packages, and that is very helpful. And they have analytical, some categories are associative links formed, analytics categories specified by the researcher. Once the links are created, the program allows the user to activate them by opening the multiple windows on the screens, and with the set off, and you see that the computer makes big impact on the data collection with a greater technological advancement and a reduction of hardware and software cost. Computer assisted interviews promise to become a primary method of data collection in the future. And basically the computer assisted and some advantage of software packages also be to help the interviewers and the researcher in regarding to the time consuming aspect and more effective and more unbiased data collection also be helpful for using some advantage of software packages. I hope you will be enjoy our these steps of data collection methods. Take care. Allah Hafiz. Inshallah, we will be met again with our step 2. Take care. Allah Hafiz.